Welcome everybody to another webinar of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. We're trying to be updated with our webinar topics. So it's not even clear if the meetings between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump has come to an end. The series of meetings, they have already two, and rumors that there's going to be a third one. But we shall try nevertheless to analyze today or tonight, depends where you sit now. What are the potential outcomes of this series of meetings between the leader of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel? There were a lot of expectations before the first meeting that there's going to be a deal between Israel and the Hamas regarding the release of the hostages and the ceasefire, that there's going to be progress on normalization with Syria. There's going to be some progress towards having negotiations with Iran and steady arrangement that would enable the United States to monitor what the Iranians are doing regarding their nuclear project. A lot of expectations also in Lebanon. There was a last-minute effort by the Americans to convince the Lebanese to do something about Hezbollah. A lot of expectations. The timetable was very short. None of that was ripe when the two leaders met. But it seems that the main topic that they were discussing was the situation in Gaza. And this is the topic that led to the second meeting, and who knows, maybe a third one. And we in JSS are very eager to analyze what's going to happen in the Middle East following these meetings. And we have several experts already here, and some of them may join later. Everybody has a personal problem, so we shall hope that by the time they are supposed to speak, they are going to be with us. We shall start with Dr. Eran Lerman, Colonel in Reserves, who is the Deputy Head of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, and used to be the Deputy Director for Foreign Policy in the National Security Council in Israel. And beforehand, in the military, used to be my deputy also in the research division of the military intelligence. And Eran, if you want to know what Eran thought about what's going to happen, you can read it on the pages of on the website of Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. But now we'll see what Eran thinks about what happened, not what is going to happen. And Eran, the floor is yours.
Well, Yossi, thank you. Clearly, we are in the midst of something happening. And for various reasons, attention in Israel, but also apparently in the meetings was on the Gaza situation, for the simple reason that the Trump administration, clearly the president himself, his envoy, Witkoff, others, were very much hoping to translate very quickly the remarkable events of the last few weeks into something tangible. And that has yet to happen. I'm not quite sure that given the chaos and disarray in Gaza itself, where Hamas is essentially by now a guerrilla organization, broken in many places. It is not necessarily a cohesive organization that can respond clearly to some of the directives, even if they do come from their leadership in exile. These expectations may have been premature. But there is, I think, a willingness, an eagerness even in Washington to see the Gaza situation to some extent brought under control in a manner that would pave the way for a much broader transformation in the region. The translation of the victory of our military operations, first Israeli and then American as well, into the consolidation of what I have been calling for many years the camp of stability. And It may take longer than these few days since the end of the fighting to make this happen. But we've seen already that Netanyahu and Trump are capable of laying the foundations at this point for things that would mature over time into something more coherent. Right now, we have to remind ourselves that the situation arises because of four incredible developments. Two of them happened, and two of them did not happen, and they are equally stunning. What happened was the very effective Israeli operation that basically denuded Iran of its air defenses and turned the entire country into an Israeli target set, and did serious damage to its nuclear project. And then came the second stunning development, which is the United States crossing the threshold, which it has never crossed before, of using force to prevent a nuclear proliferation. It did not do so in the case of Syria back in 2007. It did not have to do so in the case of Libya. It was reluctant to do so on Iran for many years. It did now. These are two transformative changes. But equally stunning is what did not happen. First of all, the Iranian response, or maybe three things that did not happen. First of all, the Iranian response was utterly underwhelming, indicative of the Iranians' understanding, despite the bravado of their statements, that they've been thoroughly defeated in the deepest sense of the word. They did not close the Hormuz Straits. They did not strike the Arab Gulf states. They did not try to kill a single American in response to what has been the nightmare of Iranian planners and the scenario for which they have promised us revenge on a colossal scale. The inability to do what they've been threatening to do for years and years is in itself a resounding change in the regional balance. Secondly, their proxies did nothing. I mean, we need to really understand just how astounding this is. Hezbollah was built for a generation, for one purpose above all. This is why for years they've kept their powder dry. Not because they were deterred, but because it was kept against the day in which Israel will do the unthinkable and attack Iran, not to mention America would do this, and Hezbollah would rain destruction on the cities and towns and villages of Israel in revenge. And these are scenarios in which Israelis envision the very real possibility of thousands of casualties. And then the day comes, Iran is attacked, first by Israel, then by the United States, and Israel continues to strike at Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, and not a bullet was fired so far from the other side of the border. Not a shot. So this utter disappearance of a key strategic component of the equation, I think is exactly why Israelis and Americans are looking, for example, at Lebanon and, of course, at Syria post-Assad as landscapes of opportunity for change, for regional to bring them into this regional consolidation concept. The third and not negligible thing is that the crink has crumbled. The China, Russia, Iran, North Korea axis of evil was nowhere to be seen helping the Iranians on anything. The Koreans sent troops to help the Russians. The Iranians sent their drones to help the Russians. The Russians responded by explaining that Israel has 2 million people of Russian origin or Russian speakers, and hence it is not to be treated as an enemy state by Russia. So the Iranians must have second thoughts about many of their assumptions.
Let me just add, we were very busy today. We probably didn't read the news, but there was these rumors about the Chinese providing air defense systems to the Iranians.
Yeah,
The Chinese hurried up to.
I know. This has been discussed because the Russians are not doing it. Maybe the Chinese will come in. We'll find out if it's actually delivered. I'm not sure the Chinese are very eager to have their systems proven
Chinese denied that this was the case.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're very eager to see their systems proven deficient, as happened to others. Moreover, some of us may have read a novel some years ago by Admiral Stavridis, in which Russia, China, and Iran conspire together to defeat the Americans with superior technological command. Well, what we saw in June was a very, very different world than described in his novel 2034. All of these are deep strategic, grand strategic changes, and grand strategic changes do not quickly translate. And I think in my paper I warned against creating an atmosphere of inflated expectations. They do not immediately translate into political change. Saudi Arabia will need to get some more from Israel, although the Prime Minister has made an interesting comment on his arrival about the Palestinians having that can have their own governance, but we must retain security control. So it was some kind of a hint that the broader Palestinian question can be part of the discussion. With Syria, there are persistent rumors about high-level contacts, and there's certainly a lot of interest in common. A Syrian activist who has been in touch with the new leadership has just spoken in the Knesset in favor of conciliatory arrangements with Syria. In Lebanon, there is a buzz about Hezbollah being transformed from a militia into a more political position. All of these are early indications of the full impact of regional change. Can this be translated into a broader arrangement in Gaza? Well, I would say that leaving aside the discussion, the heated discussion in Israel about the political constraints, at the strategic level, for this to be done, I think if there is to be a ceasefire, it must be translated in a common American-Israeli strategy, which others in the region can join, into a design to remove Hamas from power and remove them. And of course, Israel may have ultimately to do this by force, but it may also happen otherwise for the simple reason that there's no prospect whatsoever of reconstruction, of a different future in Gaza for anyone, unless Hamas leaves. And once they are totally isolated, with the Iranians reconsidering their regional game, with the Egyptians, the Saudis, and others basically committed to having Hamas replaced by something else in Gaza, with Israel making the permanent ceasefire conditional upon such an arrangement, all of this may yet come together, but it apparently takes longer than some people in Washington may have expected, or some in the media may have speculated. The change is deep, strategic, profound, and I believe long-term. Two things remain uncertain: whether Hamas is actually able and willing to be drawn into such a new reality, or will we have to continue to fight? And is the Iranian leadership, as some rumors suggest, already beginning to think about coming to the negotiating table? At least President Trump was under the impression that they may be sending these signals. There was even talk about specific talks about to start somewhere in Europe, maybe Oslo, not a auspicious venue from an Israeli point of view. But the Khamenei himself seems to hold on to his fantasy structure of what happened, which I think every Iranian above the age of 6 should know is an utter falsification of reality. But as long as he latches onto it, the doors of negotiation will not open, and then we need to sit, and I think this is also what's happening, sit and talk with the Americans about the possibility of the resumption of military operations the moment any intelligence indications that the Iranians are back to their old game. All this is I think, some of it has probably happened already behind closed doors. Some of it may yet happen. Some of it is a matter for the professional, I don't want to use the term deep staters, but for the professional elites, military and intelligence, to sit and work out over the coming weeks. But the visit itself comes at a moment in which reality has changed, and we need to translate this change into a strategic framework for the future.
Thank you, Eran. I must say that before we started the meeting, I told Eran that in the last meeting, in the last webinar, he spoke much less than the time allotted to him. This time he did the opposite. So he took back some of the time. Anyhow, now that Eran has described the overall picture, touching on all the issues, we have experts on each of the issues that Eran referred to. And following the principle of ladies first, we'll start with Advocate Yifa Segal, who is a fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And she's also the managing director of U.S Israel and fighting anti-Semitism in this respect. And she was the chief of staff of the Israeli ambassador in the United States. So she is definitely familiar with this kind of meetings. And she established earlier the International Legal Forum and was the chair of this organization for a couple of years before she went to Washington for holding the position of the head of chief of staff of the ambassador. And Yifa, I asked her to speak about the Palestinian issue, the way it looks from the Palestinian side and what needs to be done vis-a-vis the Palestinian challenge following this meeting. And of course, as we said, as Eran and myself said earlier, the Palestinian issue took most of the time in those meetings. So what are we to expect on the Palestinian side? Please, Yifa.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Yossi, for inviting me. I'll try to speak briefly on this issue, although I think it's fascinating and every single element I will mention is deserving of a much longer conversation. I'll start by stating what I think should be obvious. I think Israel cannot be expected to continue to live side by side with a neighbor that is sole purpose of existence is the destruction of the state of Israel and the killing, torturing, kidnapping, and raping of each and every one of us Israelis. And I think every opinion around the world that basically suggests that next time we should just have a few more locks on our doors is something that is unacceptable here in Israel. I think we've learned that the hard way, in the most horrific way possible on October 7th. Is that we cannot live with this devil, with this death cult on our doorstep any longer. And so the question remains, it's been over a year and a half. This has been the longest battle that we've had, even though we've always considered Hamas to be the weakest of our enemies. The destroying or significantly weakening Hezbollah took less time. The war with Iran obviously took much less time. And yet we continue to fight in Gaza. And so the question is why and what should be done? So I'll tell you that I wrote a few plans. The first one that I wrote was with Yossi Kuperwasser and a few other colleagues. It was as early as December 2023. and a couple of others that were later written to update it. The principles of these ideas basically remain the same, but I thought, the reality as it kind of advanced we should adopt our thinking. And for example, we thought early in December 2023 that this would not take this long, to reach a point that we can control, that we can speak of the day after. So the day after, I think by this moment in time is something that we should stop talking about, at least not before we talk about what to do today. Because obviously the day after Hamas is not as close as we might have wanted or thought originally. So there are a few principles, as I said, that I still believe, and I wrote in the initial program, and I still believe are fundamental. So first of all, I think, as we said, Hamas must be gone. Second of all, whoever takes control of the Gaza Strip should be committed to de-radicalization or denazification, if you will. The whole indoctrination process of what Hamas is doing, even what the Palestinian Authority is doing. We've seen a generation or two by now that is completely brainwashed into believing in the genocidal ideology of Hamas and others. The second idea that we have was the idea that we can identify one element, one organization, one group, one person that we want to be the next one in line after Hamas. There is the Palestinian Authority, of course, we can discuss in greater detail, but we don't believe it's the right group, it's the right entity. We've seen what they have done, again, with the indoctrination in the Palestinian Authority, in the textbooks, in the Palestinian society. We don't want to see that happen again in Gaza after Hamas. And of course, we don't even believe that they are capable of regaining control over the Gaza Strip. So we can identify one element. So the question is, what do we do now? And what we've suggested initially is that we kind of do a divide and conquer, decentralize the control over the Gaza Strip. So find several elements, several groups, several potential leaders, and we thought back then that the identity of these potential leaders over what can be a regional governor or whatever structure you wanna have over there will come and become more apparent as we go along with the war in Gaza. And the idea behind it is that, first of all, we don't want to make the same mistake as I believe we've made with Yasser Arafat, for example. We thought, here's a leader, not all of us, obviously, but Israel generally, that was the policy in Oslo. Here's a leader that has the power that wants to change his ways and become, instead of a terrorist, to become a supporter of at least some kind of a form of a coexistence. And of course, it turned out to be a horrible mistake, and it became impossible then to get rid of that entity. Once the Palestinian Authority was established, we couldn't get rid of Yasser Arafat, and of course now we can't really get rid of Abu Mazen, and I'm not sure we even know where we want to go in case we could have dismantled the Palestinian Authority. So I don't think we should just randomly choose one element. I don't think that there is someone that we can say potentially can be a positive leader for the entire Gaza Strip. So if we just make that decentralization, and then we find several models, let's say, we should not be focused on just having one model and have it work in a unified way throughout the Gaza Strip. It's now very clear that this is not possible. If we want to start changing reality on the ground, we have to start dividing the Gaza Strip starting today. What does that mean? For example, there is a militant group in Rafah, Abu Shabab. So I don't think we should have any illusions about who they are and what they want. They're not Zionists. They're not supportive of Israel, but they are a group that opposes Hamas in a very strong and powerful way on the ground. So, for example, we have not yet, until this moment of time, declared any territory in Gaza free of the control of Hamas. And I believe firmly that we should start doing that right now, even if it's not perfect, and even if we can just declare very small and particular parts to be even temporarily controlled by anyone else other than Hamas, and that's why I'm giving the example of Abu Shabab in Rafah, for example. I believe the Gaza Humanitarian Fund has done a great deal to kind of serve the idea that we can try to make another central principle from the beginning, that humanitarian aid must be taken away from Hamas, that it's a mechanism of control. It gives them oxygen to survive. It gives them continuous control over the civilian population. I think this is another opportunity that we have on the ground. We see it weakening Hamas, and having these closed doors meetings. I understand that there are a few other groups in Gaza trying to establish some kind of a control in specific smaller territories. And so I believe this whole idea to wait until we have the perfect solution or unified solution for the entire Gaza Strip, to wait until something like that comes along, we might wait forever. For whatever political reasons, we have not yet, took control over the entire Gaza Strip. I don't want to get into that, but we do have the ability to declare that certain areas are free from the control of Hamas, that we are now, from now on, this is the group that we're talking to in this part of the Gaza Strip, and in that part of the Gaza Strip, humanitarian aid and the entire mechanism is now put in place by the GHF, that we can use them to facilitate that very important part of controlling the population, or at least to take away the control of Hamas. And that's basically the idea. I think that we need a decentralized model. We need to start it now. We need to start, even though we don't know what will be the rest of these areas and who's going to control all the areas, but we should start declaring any area. Also, another thing I want to say, that even if there's a ceasefire agreement, or even a permanent ceasefire agreement, once there is reality on the ground, once you have another group that is in control over the certain part of the Gaza Strip, that's it. That's out of your hands. You can't give that control back to Hamas, even if all the international community puts all the pressure in the world on you. So just to summarize, that is my idea. Decentralize, start today, and let's start making progress, and just be a little bit more flexible with how we make changes as we go along, because we can start with something, realize it's not a very good idea, have some groups be replaced over time. I think that we should be a lot more flexible, a lot more open-minded about, the ideas that will help change the reality going forward.
Thank you. If I derive the lessons from what you're saying to the situation right now in the talks regarding the ceasefire, what I clearly understand from what you're saying is that Israel should insist on the Morag corridor, because the Morag corridor is essential for preserving the control of the Abu Shabab clan in eastern Rafah, and the control of the corridor, of the Morag corridor, is also essential for allowing the GHF to keep providing food for the Palestinians in between the Morag corridor and the Philadelphia corridor. So these are the practical lessons from what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that if
in line with the overall strategy that you outlined.
I totally agree, and I think that if you look at what Hamas is insisting on, then you understand from the other direction that this is exactly the key to the future. That's why they're insisting on it, and that's why we should not give up on those principles 100%.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move to Iran, and we are going to listen carefully to what Alex Grinberg has to say about it. Alex is a major in the reserves and is of course a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, but beforehand he was an intelligence analyst in the Israeli military intelligence, and he's writing his PhD thesis in Tel Aviv University regarding Iranian history. And the question is, how are the Iranians feeling now that Israel and the United States are trying to shape the Middle East together? And what does it mean to them now that they've been hit so hard during the 12 days war, during the Rising Lion operation? Alex, please.
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. There's two things that I must say prior to delving into the details of Iran. As of now, Israel has managed to remove two strategic threats emanating from Iran, namely nuclear weapons and even more ballistic missiles. Israel's goal never included a regime change or toppling of the Iranian regime simply because it is impossible. Not it is because good or not, it is impossible and undoable. No country can
Nevertheless, if the regime would have been changed, we wouldn't weep for it.
We wouldn't cry for your Iranian regime, of course, but no country in the world can control from afar a complex historical social process. The timing was chosen due to a very beneficial constellation of geopolitical circumstances, namely the weakening of Iran against the backdrop of the loss of the Syrian stronghold and Hezbollah decimation, not total annihilation or elimination, but decapitation and decimation. Without these two strategic asymmetric assets, Iran remains very weak in terms of conventional military might. This thing was clear even several years ago, that Iran is objectively a very weak country in terms of normal military might, which was had to be proven, and it was proven because even though they had detected Israeli ground forces in Iran, they could have done nothing because they don't have just mobile forces. It was clear in advance that neither Russia nor China had any intention whatsoever to help Iran. It was not a gambling of Israeli leadership. It was clear that neither Russia nor China help anyone else. Of course, not help Iran only to screw the U.S. or Israel, sorry. And regarding what is being said now, that whether the nuclear installations were destroyed or not, it is speculations and innuendos with a clear political purpose. First of all, what is meant by destroying nuclear installations? Do we mean like a big crater with nothing therein? Or it is more about putting out of action and total breaking down of very much expensive equipment? I think it's the latter. And given that, so one can say that the Iranian nuclear program is destroyed. What we hear about they will resume nukes in 2 years or 2 months. Okay, why 2 years and not 2 years and 5 months? What is this data based about? About nothing. It's just an opinion with a clear political goal, because there are some people in America and in Israel who can never say that President Trump or Prime Minister Netanyahu have done something right and good, so let's invent another thing. But again, there's no proof. One can never portray an assertion as a fact. Regarding what Iranian promises to continue the fight and all their victorious declarations, yes, this is their traditional way of doing things. They will continue doing that. And again, let's think rationally about what they can, not what they say. As long as no Iranian plane can land in Damascus or Lebanon, they cannot supply Hezbollah or assist Hezbollah with weapons, other resources. It is impossible. Of course, both Israel and America keep overseeing the Iranian territory. I'm sure, though I know nothing, that drones keep flying and overflying Iran. Mossad operative groups, I don't think they disappeared immediately after this battle. So I'm sure that if Israel insists on not letting Iran resuming its nuclear program or proxies, so it won't happen. Regarding what's going inside Iran, as it was clear again a year ago, many years ago, it wouldn't lead to a popular uprising, simply not because it cannot be because it is Iran, but because no popular uprising has happened anywhere as a result of a war. It happened only one time in Russia before the revolution because millions of Russian soldiers died in vain. So they got fed up with that, but it's only a unique case. Usually people think of their survival, and this is what happened in Iran. And what can be clearly seen as of now, that all the efforts of the regime are channeled into the preservation of the Supreme Guide's authority. So he made his first public appearance after a week in the bunker. So it is so they praised his heroism and public appearance, and he didn't look good. In the meantime, Iranian news agencies, in particular Fars News or aka false news, as we say, because they're affiliated with the RGC, so they call for mass execution of Israeli mercenaries. But again, here is the nuance. It is clear for everyone that the Israeli penetration into Iranian power was also into the highest structures of power, means not only among grassroots, who maybe helped Mossad somehow. It was among Khodi, the insiders of the Iranian system, but the Iranian press never deals with that because there is a penetration. Why they're doing so? Very clear, because it is clear for everyone. Hi, Houston or Tehran, we have a problem here. So you cannot deny it. So what they're doing is to prevent any possibility of even a mild criticism against Khamenei. And there is also the last direction that could be seen yesterday. Iranian President Pezeshkian came to Azerbaijan against the backdrop of rabble-rousing against Azerbaijan, because the RGC promised to hit Azeri territory and the Zionist interests there, but at the same time they send Pezeshkian, half Azeri, to Baku. And Pezeshkian, interestingly, accorded an interview to Tucker Carlson. So it is kind of an Iranian attempt to resume their old play of a bad cop and a good cop, so that in the West, some not so useful idiots start saying again, hi, there are two camps in Iran, moderate and extremists. Let's talk to the moderate, because why so harsh and rude? Because everyone knows that in Iran, like as in Russia, there's only one person who decides. It is not Pezeshkian. And this is the situation as of now regarding any possibility of peace or like agreement or talks between Iran and America. In my humble opinion, they're in the odds of such talks are next to nil. They're impossible because under these circumstances, any Iranian consent to talk to the Americans, no matter about what and how, cannot be interpreted otherwise as than surrender. So it won't happen. And when Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister, says that the Israeli strike dealt a fatal blow to the non-proliferation, so it says that they don't intend to comply with the NPT. So there are no talks. That's it. This is the situation as of now, and Iran never evokes, if we pay attention to that, Gaza, because since the October 7, Iran expressed its vociferous support for the Hamas massacre, and they also branded the help to the Palestinian people. Now they don't talk about that. And finally, I don't think that any deal with Hamas is possible, because Hamas will never consent to a deal that would include the release of all the living hostages without complete end of war with Israel in such a way that Israel will never be able to resume the war. So it's impossible. And as long as Hamas remains in power, no disarmament or whatever is possible again, because one can dream of Hamas disarmament or that, but they don't think it's possible. They will never agree to that. That's it. Thank you.
Alex, I have two questions. One, you said there's not going to be any popular riots that would lead to the change of the regime. Okay. But to what extent the tensions inside the regime, are there tensions inside the regime that can lead to some change in inside the regime? Because after all, they were suffering quite a heavy blow. And secondly, there's speaking of snapback by the Europeans, they keep raising this option. If there's going to be a snapback, I mean, the Iranians are very concerned about the sanctions. If there's going to be a snapback with the sanctions, or even without that, in order to relieve themselves from the American sanctions, is that something that is a good enough incentive for the Iranians to enter talks with the United States about the future of the nuclear program?
I don't think so. First, it's very complicated, of course, because I don't even think of the economic implications of this war for Iranian people, because the socioeconomic situation will only keep worsening. It will go from bad to worse, and they don't have any tools or means to improve it. But here I would say that as of now, again, I base my judgment only upon what I see. I don't see any sign of criticism against Khamenei, etc., etc. So even when I read some reflective RGC officers, they are professional people. They write anonymously, and they do criticize, for example, flows of military buildup and the preparation or unpreparedness of Iranian intelligence, etc. Even among these people, I don't see a hint of any criticism of Khamenei. Why? Because all these guys owe their social status to Khamenei. These people cannot exist without this system, and this system is strongly and staunchly ideological. I don't like using such words as fanatic, because this word is emotionally loaded and it explains nothing. So everyone is a fanatic about something, but it's staunch ideology. If Khamenei, as one Iranian analyst wrote, that Khamenei is between the hard rock and between the rock and the hard place, either a political suicide or a military suicide. So if he gives up any of the tenets of his ideology, he's done, he's lost, because what he talks in the name of God, he's representative of the Valley Faqih, of God. So if I say, listen, please, I beg your pardon, I made some stupid things, just as Putin cannot say, look, listen, I'm done with that, I'm departing. It doesn't go. So what were you doing up to now? It doesn't work. Maybe I do believe that there are two ways here. For the logic of eliminating the leaders of the regime that was done, of course, it does not resolve a problem wholly. Yeah, no. But it drastically decreases the efficiency and the effectiveness of the regime, because as we all know, I know it very well because I'm suffer from ADHD, attention deficit. I know that multitasking never works. When each of us is busy with doing 100 things, you never do anything by 100%. By the same token, when they have so many concerns, you must crack down on the dissidents, but not to anger too much people, because people are really angry, and you must do this and that, and you don't have economic resources. It won't be effective. I believe that the only way possible is when Khamenei dies, he will die somewhere, hopefully. Hopefully. Then maybe there will be some people like Rouhani that can start a new way, but again, without declaration, pompous declarations that we are like giving away. No, they just may do things quietly. But this is possible. But again, it is only possibility that should happen. Let's wait and see. But
Thank
I
you.
think it is very important to voice my two first assertions, because I think each of us can see here in Israel, like there is a mood oscillating between hysteria and euphoria. Either Iran is destroying us tomorrow, we can do nothing, or we have not finished the job. And say, no, it was not the job. The job that had to be finished is done.
Thank you, Alex. Our next speaker is Jonathan Hessen, who's going to refer to the Syrian and Lebanese issues following what happened in Washington. Jonathan is a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He's also an expert on the United States with good relationships in Washington. And he's the editor-in-chief of the TV7 Israel and senior fellow at the Hudson Institute in Washington, non-resident fellow over there. And with all of that, he's equipped with the knowledge to address the situation in Syria. We all are following the news that there was probably a meeting between Tzachi Hanegbi, our national security advisor, and Shara and in the UAE, and all kinds of prospects of almost a peace between us and Syria. To what extent do you think this can be materialized after this meeting?
Well, thank you, Yossi, first and foremost, and it was very interesting to hear Yifa, Alex, and Eran beforehand, so I appreciate all what was said. You know, it's quite impressive that Ahmad al-Shara, or Abu Muhammad al-Julani, however you want to refer to him, reportedly met with the National Security Advisor of Israel in the Emiratis in Abu Dhabi, but at the same time, that same National Security Advisor was able to be in a meeting in Washington, D.C. So apparently some people can be at two places at the same time.
I'm working on that for
miraculously.
a long time now.
I know. I wish, you know, maybe some technology in Israel managed to figure out how to be at two places at the same time. But all jokes aside, I think, you know, everything that was said also initially by you and then by Dr. Lerman, and also points that Alex referred to, need to be brought into context here from an American prism. From the Trump administration's onset, since assuming office on January 20th, we do need to understand that they have taken it upon themselves to approach or deal with the issue that is, in their opinion, the major issue, and that is strategic power competition. Since March 27th, 2021, during the known meeting in Alaska between State Counselor of China Wang Yi and the Secretary of State at the time, Antony Blinken, the Chinese have engaged in strategic power competition, announced that at least, and since then to date, the United States has been, of course, proactively seeking to counter any attempts by China to flank America, to replace America with the various actors, the CRINC, which Dr. Lerman mentioned, of course, to include Russia and Iran, albeit they secondary and third degree actors within the context of strategic power competition. Nonetheless, having this group of various actors operating together against the United States and the Western bloc at large has brought a clear understanding in Washington that this is the core that they need to focus on. I will trickle down to the 2 points that you asked me to speak about, which is Syria and Lebanon. But I think that it's important to understand the context here, since when we're talking about Syria and Lebanon, they're derivatives of. When the United States looks specifically at the various challenges at hand, it does not look at Syria and identifies the complexities of Syria as an issue that needs to be dealt with, but rather it draws from that strategic power competition perspective where Syria and Lebanon serve as a buffer between two major allies of the United States with a capacity, a fighting capacity, but also the capacity to project power beyond their sovereign territories, namely the NATO ally Turkey on the one hand, and Israel, a major non-NATO ally and even a strategic partner. And within that context, that's the way the United States approaches the Syrian issue. That's the way the United States also approaches the Lebanese issue. That is one of the reasons also that were rationalized in context on whether or not Morgan Ortagus would maintain the so-called Lebanese file after being removed from the position of deputy envoy to the Middle East. And it was not the case. The person who took the file of both Syria and Lebanon was no other than the American ambassador to Turkey, namely Tom Barrack, who was very keen on conflict resolution and mediation in context of Israel and Turkey. And then within that context, again, looking specifically on Syria, understanding that there is a keen interest in establishing a certain sense of stability within that country, alongside the Lebanese situation where Hezbollah, as Alex has referred to, has been decapitated and has been frustrated from its own capacity to serve as a deterrent against any type of scenario in which Israel then needs to confront the Islamic Republic of Iran, in which Hezbollah would then launch various munitions towards Israeli territory. In the current situation, we see a new reality in which the United States looks at it and realizes, no, this is not the case. They cannot project power anymore outwardly. They only are able to project power inside of Lebanon. And therefore, when it comes to Lebanon specifically, the United States is now, as was mentioned initially, dealing with a reality in which they want to disarm Hezbollah, and they're working with President Joseph Aoun quite vigorously with the Lebanese armed forces, but they also utilize Israeli strong power to enforce whatever the Lebanese army cannot and whatever UNIFIL cannot. So we're seeing a classic case of Karl von Clausewitz, where you understand quite well the policy that you want to pursue, utilizing the various components of power, be it economic leverage, other types of leverage from strong power to diplomacy, and operating in synergy with various actors to see a certain change in the structure of Lebanon. But again, this is merely a small component from a broader architecture that the Trump administration wants to employ throughout the Middle East. The same goes for Syria proper. It's, again, dealing with Ahmed al-Shara, who nobody is delusional about the case that Ahmed al-Shara is a jihadist. The words of so-called reformation is merely for public consumption. Everybody who I've spoken to in Washington understand that he is a full-fledged jihadist with tactical interests of the short term, medium term, and long term. And yet they do understand also that he's manageable and he doesn't have the strong power to back up any real threat to either the state of Israel, and at the same time, it's also a certain aspect of leverage over Turkey in the broader sense. So there are a lot of aspects that need to be taken into account with regard to the Syrian file. Many are speaking about some sort of normalization with Syria. Even Tom Barrack, the American envoy, spoke about potentially an Abraham Accords by the end of this summer. I will just mention that as closing, that the only thing that is actually discussed in a tangible manner is reaching a certain arrangement in which the 1974 armistice is bolstered. Israel maintains its control over the Golan Heights in force, and there are three separate buffers, so to speak, going south of Damascus in a very demilitarized fashion that would not allow any type of heavy munitions to be operated south of Damascus. But at the same time, there's also a broader buffer zone from Turkey's perspective that goes 60 kilometers from the 1974 armistice line northward, which has also more application in the broader context to, again, establish a certain buffer between Ankara and Jerusalem at times of heightened tensions.
Oh, yes, Alex, you wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. I would like to ask you the following question. When I look at what's going on in Syria, I understand that I know nothing in terms of what is going on concretely in many Syrian localities. What's the security situation? I know nothing because my impression is that it's not so important whether Ahmed al-Shara is or not jihadist. What is important that Syrian state doesn't exist. And I think if it's true, everyone must hold it in mind very firmly, to have it hardly wired. Because we consent or sign something, it's no matter that he doesn't want or he can. It's like he controls Damascus at Damascus at
Right.
best. That's it. Is
So Abu
my
Muhammad
assertion
al-Jalani,
true?
yeah,
Go ahead.
the truth is quite simply, they do not have control over the majority of Syria. There are currently talks, or the delegations are now scrambling for meetings with Ahmed al-Shara and the Kurdish SDF, so to speak, to discuss the areas of al-Hasaka and other aspects. But again, this has to do more specifically with the arrangements related to Turkey rather than the Syrian file proper, and their capacity to control any territories beyond Damascus and Idlib are very limited. The only actual tangible force that Ahmed al-Shara has at this point has to do with nominal numbers of forces with light weaponry, not a lot of heavy munitions, and therefore their capacity to project power inwardly and really make a difference of attaining control of Syria as a whole does not exist. The only true actor that is currently maintaining Syria together is no other than the United States of America, Turkey from a intelligence perspective, and Saudi Arabia from a fiscal perspective.
Thank you,
Yes,
Justin.
but,
Can you see the picture here that I shared?
Yes.
It's an Iranian cartoon saying "Shukhia Janat Korban." The joke of a war criminal, meaning Netanyahu, with a Nobel Prize. So Bibi is like incentivizing Trump to get the Nobel Prize. It's from today Hamshahri newspaper.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but to what extent do you think we can actually, Jonathan, we can actually, I fully agree with the caveats about the extent to which Shara is actually representing a cohesive state behind him. But he represents what people tend to call Syria, and it seems that from the point of view of the administration, they want to give him a chance, as repeatedly the president says repeatedly, and with the blessing of Israel's prime minister, that also was mentioned by Trump. So, do you think that there is a capability of Shara to move considerably in this direction?
When we're talking about the various nuances domestically, Ahmad al-Shara is nothing close to reformed, right? He is pushing for Sharia education with various elements of the economy being very, very ideologically in the application of governance right now. The attempts to consolidate power over minorities, be they the Druze or the Alawites or others, have been not very successful, to say the least. And more so when you really look at the complexities of Ahmad al-Shara, it seems to be, and this is my assessment of the situation, right now, he seems to be successful due to the goodwill of the West to somehow consolidate a reality and a certain fatigue of other actors in Syria to raise up arms and really create something that would cause the country to fall into mayhem, going from Ahmad al-Odeh, who happens to have more strong power than Ahmad al-Shara, right? In the current date, and yet Ahmad al-Odeh does not seek to bring the situation into chaos because he just doesn't feel confident enough due to the sentiments of the West. The moment those sentiments disappear or Ahmed al-Shara is eliminated, this all may crumble into a terrible chaos. And that is something that does concern me. With that being said, I will also point out that there is also an understanding in the United States that whatever they're doing currently in Syria needs to focus on strong institutions rather than individuals, because the institutions will undoubtedly outlast individuals, and therefore there needs to remain a certain vigilance in that process at the current stage, since if al-Shara is eliminated, this might bring both chaos into the country and would also undoubtedly draw Turkey into the mix with Jaish al-Watani, which has a lot more troops and is basically a constellation of 15 militias operating as a Turkish proxy. They have more strong power than the current Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the security forces, so to speak, that have all kind of Al-Qaeda and Islamic State elements integrated into them in a recent months. So the situation is still very fluid, and therefore we need to wait and see how this is going to evolve in the next several weeks. There are 2 points from an American perspective that we also need to take into account. One, Trump did sign an executive order to suspend all sanctions on Syria. It's not necessarily all sanctions. There are certain caveats, but it is very robust in this aspect, where there are limitations on still strong power capabilities from entering into the theater, and still very strong sanctions on various elements of Al-Qaeda and Daesh that still today have been integrated into al-Shara's so-called security apparatus. There are still sanctions. And the Caesar Act is still in force. So the Caesar Act cannot be repealed except for Congress and the Senate, and there are currently bills tabled to do that, but nonetheless, this process is a lot slower in light of other prioritized issues for the various actors at hand. So we need to wait and see how all those various pieces of the puzzle are going to evolve. But I would draw back and reiterate, it's not about Syria, it's not about Lebanon, it's about establishing a certain buffer between Turkey and Israel, and at the same time also ensuring that Iran does not reinvigorate its power and entrench once more in Syria, because that would bring about once again the reemergence of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So there is also that very keen aspiration to see a certain pushback on any Iranian involvement. What we're currently seeing in North Iraq and the Kurdistan regions between the PKK and the Peshmerga troops of Barzani is once again just a glimpse of the fact that the Iranian RGC Quds force is not willing to just stand idly by and let Turkey fill in all of the power vacuum that has emerged due to its various defeats in the battlefield. It is intending to fight back via various proxies, and this is merely the first instance where we're seeing this fully brought up, basically, or boiling over with Iranian logistical support and financial support.
Thank you. We have one question to Yifa that refers to what do we read out of the story about the Hebron sheikhs and their readiness to cooperate with Israel, accept Israel as a Jewish state, and so on and so forth. When this comes also in under the background of what's happening in Gaza, what you described as the potential for building relationships with local clans. Is this something real? Is this something with the potential to change the situation between us and the Palestinians, or is it just a small event that would not have a lasting impact on those relationships?
I think it depends on how we treat it, right? I think Jonathan just explained at great length that a lot of the power that Shara has comes from the West. Deep desire to make him into the leader of Syria, and not so much the reality on the ground. So I believe that if we make the effort into making this into a big deal, into making this into a sustainable new reality, then it might become that. And I want to add that in my original thinking, I thought, if we can show that this can work in Gaza, then we can potentially duplicate it into Judea and Samaria. I mean, we look at the Palestinian Authority for years now. We see that it's falling apart. We know that the days of Abu Mazen are numbered. Maybe it's a few years, but he's not a young guy or a healthy guy.
His father died when he was 105. Take this into account.
Yeah, I know. They keep saying that. But anyway, it seems like the Palestinian Authority is losing control, slowly but surely, in many parts of areas A and B. And so the idea was let's show that it works in Gaza and then try to duplicate it in Judea and Samaria. But maybe it doesn't have to wait to that. I mean, if as we've seen, these sheikhs we know have been talking to a few Israeli experts, even some parts of the Israeli government for years. All of a sudden, they're coming out of the closet, right, in the Wall Street Journal, and declaring their willingness. I think we should embrace it. I mean, at the very least, it can be a pilot that we can see if it's successful or not. Now, I think that if first of all, if you create smaller, as I said in the beginning, if they control a smaller amount of territory and people, then their potential threat to Israel in the future is also much smaller. So I know it in the West it seems impossible. I mean, let's navigate between all these different entities. We always want to have one address to talk to, one address. So I understand the advantages of that, but the disadvantages of the current system are so great that I think that we can try to change the way we do things and try to change the paradigm. Also, by the way, it's a different issue, but It could have been possible to try it in Syria or in Lebanon, to try to divide, to look at each entity as a potential independent entity. But I'm leaving that aside. I think it's definitely, you know, an amazing timing for them to come out and say we're willing to do this, and we should definitely, you know, try to make that happen. And I think even for those that are still in love with, you know, this two-state solution with a Palestinian state and a future Palestinian state, I think we should tell them that, you know, the current situation will only lead to endless and countless, you know, rounds of violence again and again and again. Nothing will ever change if we don't change the way that we think of the situation. And so potentially, if we can have these different entities kind of be established, it doesn't matter if you want to call them emirates or governance or whatever you want to call them, and they are more positive or at least less hostile over a duration of several years, potentially there could be a political solution. Maybe they will unite together one day, maybe not, maybe they'll become a federation, whatever. Like, there are so many, you know, possible future solutions, but what we need to change is what we, you know, to try to keep and make the same mistake over and over again, expect different solutions, you know, what Einstein said about that. So yeah, I would say it is something that I would recommend we try.
Eran, you want to refer to the two? You're muted. Eran, you're muted. No, yeah.
No, I'm no longer mute. Frankly, I think we should be very careful about being tempted in this respect, but we do need to prepare for the post Abu Mazen transition in Ramallah, and we definitely need to see a much more capable Palestinian Authority emerging than the current weak and ineffectual, corrupt system. There are certainly, I would focus really on what needs to emerge in Gaza, and there, if something emerges there in the post-Hamas era that internalizes the lessons of the catastrophic results of the confrontation, then we do have the prospect of creating a different future of Israeli-Palestinian relations. The majority of Palestinians will stay. With all due respect to voluntary migration, it actually may tempt the better or more productive elements in Gaza and leave us with the rest. But we need to start. Abu Shabab is a possibility. The locals are as discussed, breaking up Gaza into regional arrangements. But all of this needs ultimately to create a reality in which, as the Prime Minister said, the Palestinians govern themselves, but security is entirely in Israeli hands.
Thank you. Well, let me sum it up. What I think is that there is a tension between the potential for positive changes in the Middle East following what happened in Iran and following these meetings between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States, because there something has happened. The shadow of the Iranian-led Axis, and with all its implications, has been removed from the area to a large extent. Yes, they still have bad intentions, but they have much lesser capability to implement those, to make these intentions a reality. And this has to be translated into some new initiatives, some new realities on the ground. But maybe what we did here is shed some reality check on the pace with which these things can happen, and the directions in which they have to lead. Because on the other side, there are all kinds of weak players, problematic players, and not necessarily immediate solutions to what we expect to see. And it's not going to be immediately followed by a change of regime in Iran, or readiness on behalf of the Iranians to accept some sort of real monitoring of their intentions and the activities concerning the nuclear project. There is a problem with the Syrian leadership. and to what extent they can move forward and deliver. There is a problem with the situation in Gaza. And the direction that Yifa suggested is, of course, a very good one to follow from an Israeli point of view, but it's not yet clear whether this pilot that we have done with Yasser Abu Shabab can be duplicated in other places in Gaza. So the challenges are still lying ahead of us, and we have to do our best together with the Americans to move in the positive directions that we want to see happening, enlarging and broadening the Abraham Accords and establishing some sort of normal relations with or some reasonable security cooperation with Syria and removing the capabilities of Hezbollah from their hands. They are all good intentions, and I saw that Mauritania may do something and all kinds of countries may join in. This is all good news, but we have to, it says the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security is a realistic think tank, so sticks to reality. So we have to understand that in reality, there are many challenges ahead of us in translating the new situation into new, much better reality for Israel. And in the meanwhile, we have to be very much on alert and keep following what's happening in all these places, because bad things can happen too. So that's what we have to remember when we sum up this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for a very interesting webinar. Thank you for our listeners, the participants, and see you in the next webinar.